Hi, I'm Alistair Shipley. Driven by the beliefs that everyone has something special to offer, I created Not So Average, the podcast that proves that you don't need to be in the top 1% to be truly extraordinary. Each episode spotlights everyday people from your community, the very individuals you might pass on the street. These relatable stories reveal that whether you're a jack of all trades or a niche specialist, we all have unique experiences and valuable lessons to share. Imagine if we all took a moment to realize we're all not so average. Let's get after it. Welcome to another episode of Not So Average. Today I'm thrilled to bring on my guest, Grant Lahring. Grant is a co-founder of Goodlawyer, one of Calgary's well-known startups, and a passionate entrepreneur with a diverse background that includes international experience with Uber down in New Zealand. Beyond his professional achievement, Grant also has a twin brother named Wade that we're eventually going to get on here too, a deep connection to his small town roots. And Grant, I am really excited to have you on today. Thank you so much for making the time. I'm excited to kind of share your inspiring story and get people aware of your platform, Goodlawyer. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
I'm excited to have you on here. So kind of to tip an easy question over to you, what's a quote that you've been living with recently that really has been resonating?
A quote? Nice. In the spirit of the podcast, I did no preparation. So no, I do not have a quote on the tip of my tongue. I think it's the new year. I did my annual resolutions as I always do. And the one thing I added this year was I went and codified my operating principles. So I think the operating principle that I quote the most is the asbestos principle.
The asbestos
that's my version of a quote here, but have you heard of that?
No, I want to hear this.
Okay, so that's basically if you're doing a home reno or something and you expose asbestos, like you open a wall up and you see asbestos, you're legally obligated to pull it all out and fix it on the spot. You can't close it back up.
Yeah.
So the way I apply that is like if I see a problem in life or in work, I oblige myself to fix it on the spot and not to keep walking.
Okay.
That's what I call the asbestos principle. That's one of my 6 operating principles that I codified over the break.
I did not see that one coming. I definitely did not see that one coming. But I thought I'd throw that quote question to you because you are very well read. You're very well written too. Like that's a big part of your LinkedIn is I think how many times a week do you make a post? You don't do it like as a schedule, but you do make a conscious effort.
Yeah, I try to post like once a week. Okay. But my rule is also only post if there's a post. If it's something worth talking about. I see people doing the post every day challenge, and in about 7 days they run out of content, and then everyone's just kind of watching the spiral.
They're reusing everything, and then they're just leaning on AI to come up with ideas that aren't genuine to themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely see that on LinkedIn quite a bit. But so kind of wanted to get started with, I kind of go into people's personal journey, starting kind of early years and stuff like that. Remind me again, whereabouts did you grow up?
I'm an Alberta boy. I grew up just west of Sundre, which is like a tiny little town, maybe 2 hours northwest of Calgary.
Okay. Your parents had a small business as well, correct?
Yeah, my parents owned a greenhouse.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and they put it in like the worst spot ever for a business, like out in the woods, like 20 minutes west of a small town. Like who on earth would go 20 minutes out of their way to buy flowers? But they made it a real destination thing, and it's just a weird way to grow up, but I loved it. It was in the middle of a forest and very beautiful.
Did you go to school near there? Did you get homeschooled? Like I find a lot of people that do live out remotely, they do a lot of homeschooling. Tell me a little bit more about your kind of schooling background.
Oh yeah, I mean my parents are big fans of the system, so they put me on the bus to Sundre. There's only one school there, so it's just a public school, Delio.
How long was the commute?
Long. I think it was like a 15-minute walk-ish to the bus stop and then an hour bus ride every morning. Oh my gosh. Like the second stop they picked up, so we'd go all over the countryside before we got to the town. Oh my God. But I mean, if for the sake of the podcast, formative experiences, I got 2 hours of reading time every day. Yeah. And like I used that time for reading. So Wade and I were like years ahead of the curve on reading.
Fair.
On books and things like that.
Yeah, what was kind of the book series that you remember the most from your childhood, riding the bus?
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. Okay. Yeah, you and your brother, extensive readers. And you're saying that's kind of where it got started?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And it wasn't like we were reading like interesting, thought-provoking stuff necessarily, just like novels and things like that. But just having a lot of practice.
Yeah,
Got
practice.
us ahead, so it was nice.
Well, I kind of go in and out with reading. So there's huge stints where I'll spend years reading anywhere between 50 to 70 books a year, and then I fall out. And there was a period of time where I was getting actually very methodical about how I read, and I might have to expand on this another time, but it was like certain books, I had to have physical copies because I use it as a textbook, and I did the highlighting thing, and I wrote notes. Some was more a mental escape, so I could do it on an ebook. But this course that I was reading about how to read, it was very interesting there, because you often hear people are like, I'm not really a fan of reading. Well, you just haven't found the right books yet. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people are reading for a particular mission. And if you're just reading for pure enjoyment, there's a book for everybody out there. And you just have to find the right book. And then it's pretty easy to get sucked in. Now, I realize too, like busy lifestyles, sometimes you're exhausted at the end of the day. But if you're reading fiction like Harry Potter, that's a mental escape. And it's so much easier than trying to read like a self-help book at the end of your working day. Right?
100%, yeah.
Random ramble, but
Yeah.
so...
Yeah. I mean, hold on though. What are you reading these days? What are you not reading right now, or you are?
I'm not actually reading as much as I'd like to. So, yeah, the last book that I read was Trust, and it was a Pulitzer Prize winner from like 2003 or 2023. That was the last book, but last year I was really book light. This year I've kind of been more. My bedtime routine and my morning routine has drastically changed. I used to wake up and read books or go to bed and read books. Now it's more so journaling. So it's not a good excuse, but I should probably get back into it. What books do you recommend right now?
Right now, I mean, I just want to add on a bit that reading before bed is the best.
Yeah.
Like if you read, I used to read like an hour before bed every night, and I'd never get through the hour. Like I'd fall asleep, and it would feel so good. You just be like natural sleep. Anyway, what am I reading right now? I am in a non-reading period of my life right now, unfortunately, because I'm practicing Spanish every night, and that takes every minute of my life.
So I just had to ask this question. Obviously, you have a twin brother. How has having a twin influenced your personal and professional life?
That's a good question. I think twins often go like one of two ways, or even brothers, honestly, you typically go this way, where it's like either they are more and more similar, or they get more and more apart and kind of deliberately differentiate their identities. I think Wade and I are the similar type. And I think and I've talked to Wade about this as well, but like I think it anchors my identity more. It makes me more confident in like why I do the things I do, because I have somebody to talk to, and I talk to that guy and he's like, yeah, that's a good idea. When I think of things like, is it ridiculous that I think of a thing that we do, like spending a bunch of money on fancy clothing. We're pretty opposed to that. We have the view that like there's a huge like there's a marketing markup, and like people pay a bunch of money for like a watch, for example. Like why would I ever own a watch? Like it's such a waste of money. Like thousands of dollars, they do absolutely nothing my phone doesn't do. Anyway, so I'll like bring that theory to Wade, and he's like, yeah, of course, that's stupid. And then we're like,
so he's validating your points.
Yeah, which is it's a strength in some ways because I'm more confident in my identity, and it's a weakness because I'm a stubborn old goat. It's hard to change my opinions on things.
Okay. Yeah. Fair. I just had to ask that question. I wasn't going to get into more ridiculous questions that generally come with twins. My uncles are twins, and you just get the most ridiculous questions.
Okay. My favorite twin one, I will say, people always ask me, do you ever play jokes on people? And the answer is no, because they happen anyway. Like, there's so many people who have never met me that think that I've like talked to you all the time. Like they don't know that Grant exists. They just know Wade. And like
that's how I met your brother, because I thought I was talking to you at the Mount Royal gym, and he's just like, nope, definitely don't have a class. I was like, I'm pretty confident, and he's like, no, you're talking to my twin brother. I was like, But then I eventually had a class with your brother too. So, okay.
Well, like, why would you go out of your way to make more of that happen? Like, it's already every day.
Oh,
as
man.
a twin.
My uncles are twins, and they can't differentiate themselves in childhood photos.
I can't.
Yeah.
Heck no.
Yeah, they're also identicals. So, yeah, it was wild.
I mean, I only ever see him, right?
You and I both attended Mount Royal University. How did your time there prepare you for your future career and kind of your entrepreneurial ventures that you got into?
Good question. This is a question I ask Wade about all the time. I think my current theory, it might seem kind of strange from what you know of me, because you only know me from university on.
Okay.
But going into university, I was like really shy, really quiet, kind of a weird, nerdy kid.
Okay. Okay.
And when Wade and I moved to Calgary, we kind of committed to like getting away from that. We're like, no, we're gonna be more extroverted. We're gonna get out there and kind of be the people we want to be and remake ourselves. So MRU for us was a chance to do that, and it was great because we didn't know anybody there. We could start
change
fresh.
your identity.
So we really used that as a chance to change our identity, and it took a long time to do that. But I'm really glad that I had university to do that. I lived on campus for the 4 years. I even stayed on campus 2 summers. So I was very much attached to the school. I was in 3 clubs.
What clubs?
We helped start the ski club, which became the biggest club at the school and still runs really strong. And I went to a ski club event last year, and they still kind of pay homage to the founders, which is super cool.
That's awesome.
I was president of the marketing society, so needs no explanation. And I was involved in Enactus, and of course you were as well. And there's a bunch of amazing, probably my best friends came out of Enactus. They ended up being the most inspiring group of people I ever met. And that was kind of, I'll use that as a part B to that answer, but like the people I met at university were totally different than the people I grew up with.
Yeah.
The vibe in Sundre when I was there in the high school was that it was like a race to the bottom.
Expand on that.
Basically, if you tried, even if you studied, people would insult you and say you were a nerd and you were trying too hard, and like it was what you wanted to be was like the most drunken asshole, basically, and you wanted to fight the most and like just be belligerent monster, basically. And that was the top of the pecking order. So like I didn't fit into that. Like my parents really wanted me to try, and I didn't have to try, honestly, so I never learned how to try. But
school came kind of easier for you in terms of like you didn't have to study and you got good grades?
It was all the reading thing. Like the reading made school really easy for me.
Yeah.
And like really easy. Like my sister was top scholar. Sister was valedictorian. Brother was top scholar. I was right behind him. Like the 3 of us had no trouble in that school.
Wow.
But we had university educated parents who valued that.
Yeah.
Whereas pretty much everyone in Sundre is going the opposite direction. We're like, get in the trades, get working as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Long story short, I basically had to pretend not to try and to pretend to be kind of one of them when I was in high school, which just felt wrong to me, but I did it many, many times. And then in university, I met people who liked to try. And then mostly it was this Enactus group who were like so ambitious, who were like, we should start a business, we should do this, we should do that. And like, I just found that like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, these are my people.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that was special. So yeah, there's the changing kind of myself. Another part of that, honestly, was the gym. Like, the gym for me was massive. It was a chance to like, I guess just be more happy with my body.
Okay.
And my physical appearance.
Yeah.
And like, I learned how to work out, and it made me super happy. And I was at the gym constantly, and I like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are kind of the 3 pieces. The question that I always wonder about university is like, could I have gone to honestly a better school?
Okay.
Like I like MRU, and I like I said, the experience was transformational.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the education quality was very good. I still wonder about that.
I've been asked by the university in studies. So Jennifer Richardson, when she was working there, was asking follow-up questions about our education and application to the real world. And this was when I was working at the robotics company. And I distinctly remember being like, I've not utilized any of my schooling necessarily. It was the indirect stuff that I learned. Like the group that we met in university was my core area of learning. Like they were the ones that drove all the information to me. So if my friends were talking about XYZ things with blockchain or AI or you name it, I took interest in that. For university, the things that I kind of took away was more around team development and critical thinking, and I guess not so much stuff that's related to the curriculum. Still valuable things, but could I have learned that somewhere else? Maybe. Could I have turned out in my career the same way that I had if I went to, say, like Queens or McGill or something like that? I don't know. Like maybe I'd like to have faith in my abilities with people and what I take from others, but I don't necessarily think that I would be in the same fields or same friend groups or anything like that drive me. Like maybe I would have ended up in a university where I lived in the library and didn't have a friend circle because I didn't find those like-minded people. Mm-hmm. Maybe Mount Royal was just full of those same people that were like, we're good enough to get into this school and I want to do better. And we found each other. I don't know. That's a ramble thought, but
what about the program?
The program
if you were starting again, would you take business again?
So I decided to do a general business program and just kind of, once again, continue with the being a jack of all trades and the master of none. I think I would have gotten a little more focused on, say, like marketing or things that I really don't think I would have enjoyed, but more of a financial background. Accounting. There wasn't a finance program at Mount Royal, unfortunately, so that wasn't an option. But I went in with an intention of learning general business because I wanted to become a restaurateur. I wanted to run restaurants. So I needed to know a little bit of everything, right? So would I have done something different? I don't know. I think I found the right thing for me and I stumbled upon it. So yeah, general business, and then the entrepreneurship program. I was the second graduating class of the entrepreneurship program, which is now, well, we like to hear that it's been well sought after and it's been well recognized, but yeah, very early stage.
I think that's an interesting answer. So you're basically like, yeah, that was the way to go.
Me saying that I should have done something different is almost admitting that I wanted my life to turn out differently. So that's me more or less fighting it.
Got it.
Could I have done something differently? Oh, 100%. 100%. I could have applied a little bit harder for university. I only applied to Mount Royal, and I got in. I don't think I would have gotten in now in hindsight with the grades, but yeah. I did turn my high school grades drastically around. Like I was a B student, like a B- B student. And then I went to SAIT. I got like near a 4.0 for the 2 years that I was there. And that's what brought me to Mount Royal. And then Mount Royal, I think I graduated like a 3.9 or something like that.
Great.
So I think I got exactly what I needed at the right time. Yeah. How about you?
If you want one answer, same thing. Like, I think it was the right thing for me. Mostly because I had all this personal development to do that I don't think I could have done if I'd been in engineering or like if I'd been on like a medicine track or something. I don't think I could have gained the confidence and social skills that I needed.
You're not going to get social skills in an engineering program.
That's the thing. I think it would have been a worse
Sorry,
life
listeners,
if I'd done that. So I think ultimately I'm okay with it, but like that's the piece that I'm like, I wish I could have learned those skills earlier so that I maybe could have studied engineering, because like to me, like none of these technical degrees close the door on business. Like you can always go be a general manager at a place, even with an engineering degree or a biology degree or psychology degree. Like that doesn't close any doors, whereas like business degree doesn't open a lot of doors really.
Yeah, just because you have your master's, you have your MBA. Yeah, I don't think if I was to get my MBA, that more doors would have opened anyway. So I agree with that statement wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Fair.
And I go back to MRU sometimes to talk to the students and stuff, and like the door opening philosophy is kind of what I've landed on.
Yeah.
For coaching general groups of people, it's like putting yourself in a path that opens more doors is generally better than less doors.
Yeah.
Think of it that way, and that's why I think if I was to redo it, I don't know exactly what I'd do different, but that's the philosophy I would take.
Yeah. So you and I have, I like to think, a similar background in the sense of we worked our way through sales and business development and pseudo marketing for a lot of different types of companies. So you did like non-for-profit with Habitat for Humanity. You did Uber down in Auckland, which I have some questions on later. So international sales, and then you got into, technically vertical farming here, and now you're with a legal tech firm. I don't know if you share this, but I truthfully believe with my background, my actual strength is in people and humans, and the doors are always going to open because of the relationships that I built. There is a level of competency that I bring with my sales background and all that various experiences too, but I don't think a sheet of paper is going to get me into any more doors than me having kind of conversations like I'm having with you. People that I talk to, even just like, I live in downtown Calgary, I'll have a conversation with somebody at DeVille Coffee Shop, and that opens more doors than any of my certificates that I've gotten as extracurricular study. So I don't know.
I mean,
but
I think, like what I've found is the degree kind of opens like the first door.
Yeah.
Like your first job, maybe your second if you churn through that first job quickly, but like the degree stops mattering pretty quick. Like, and then people stop asking, like, they never really even asked me, but it's like, okay, here's where you work, that's who you are. Yeah. So I guess that is important. It doesn't really follow you that much.
I need to really bring in some people with like academia experiences to hear kind of because they just have different perspectives overall. And I just went through recruiting for a junior position at the solar company, and there were some people that were heavily invested in academia, and they've been published and put in journals and all this kind of stuff, and impressive people. But then you're sitting there like, where was the real world application of something like this? But I want to get their perspective on that kind of stuff. But anyways, I ran down a complete tangent. That I like to pull those kind of threads. And so I want to go to your leap of going international, because I went international with sales too, but you went like 16 different time zones international. So what motivated you to move to Auckland, New Zealand and work with Uber?
I mean, it looks better on paper than it was.
Well, it normally is.
I haven't told you this? No, I broke up with my first girlfriend.
Okay.
And I was like,
life leads you.
Boo-hoo, I'm so sad. I have to, everything I see reminds me of all the cute dates we went on. Now I have to leave Calgary. Why not go somewhere cool? So I got the visa, but I'm super loyal to my work. So I gave them 6 or 7 months notice. I was like, I'm moving to Australia. And they're like, your contract doesn't even last that long. You're on contract for another month. We should just not renew you, you idiot. Yeah. But they liked me, so they renewed me. But clearly by the time I actually left for Australia, I was over it. It was fun.
Yeah. Okay. So did I bumble that in the research? You're saying Australia.
I started in Australia, yeah.
Okay.
So I moved to Australia because I had a buddy that I met on campus at MRU that was Aussie, and he was living in Brisbane, and he was like, yeah, sure, Brisbane's cool. And then he was gonna help me get settled in, and he did. I got to live in his closet for a week, and then I found a rental and and started working. But the funny thing there is Uber seems like the perfect place for me to work. It's tech, it's everything I wanted. But actually what happened was I ran out of money. I completely out of money. I signed a 6-month lease. I'd done all these things to integrate, but I didn't manage to get a job because a working holiday visa there is second class. They don't want you in a permanent job, and being a stubborn bastard, I was no, I'm not putting my career on hold for my holiday. I'm a professional. Yeah. Anyway, didn't get the job, was down to I'm going to deliver food on my bicycle because I have no other choice.
Yeah.
And I sweet talked the lady that was setting me up at the Uber hub into introducing me to her boss, and then her boss gave me a job helping out at that hub, like literally just like licensing couriers, and then that was how I got into Uber, and then was there for a year and a half.
So obviously you made an impact while you were there at Uber, because then you eventually took a position in Auckland. How did that happen?
Well, yeah, so Brisbane was super quick. Like we just launched Brisbane for Uber Eats. And then, so I was getting all the supply on the road. That was my first job. And then after like a month, they kind of went around the team. And they're like, who wants to try sales? Like, we're going to launch Gold Coast.
Yeah. I'm smiling because I remember you giving me like a Facebook message. You're like, hey, you've been doing sales a while. Can I just call you and just ask your opinion on some things? I was like, yeah, for sure. And I think I had just come back from San Francisco or something. But yeah, you asked me about this position that you're taking. So that's why I was smiling. But yeah, you're pretty green at that point too.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
But it was like, I mean, there was no training either. It was like, we had like a 2-hour Zoom call with like our sales manager from Sydney, and that was the training. And then it was like, get on the phone. And we were just like calling restaurants. And I was thrilled because I was the first guy to get a close on day one. I closed somebody.
Amazing.
And that was it. So then we launched Gold Coast, and that was awesome. And then after we'd kind of got that whole city up and running, the New Zealand launch happened, and they tried launching in Auckland, and it was a disaster. And they basically let go or moved all the salespeople. And then they kind of went to the office like, hey, does anybody want to like help Auckland figure their shit out? And then they looked at me and they're like, this guy's the backpacker. This guy's been, working from every office in Australia and taking advantage of that. And he likes to move around, and his visa's about to end. Why doesn't he do it? So I was like, yeah, I'll go. So then I moved over there,
I'm surprised you ever came back.
I am too, honestly. I love New Zealand. New Zealand's sick.
Yeah, that's awesome. So kind of walk me through your journey from returning to Calgary from New Zealand, working at companies like Deepwater Farms, stuff like that, to becoming, I guess, one of the early stage hires for now what is your position as a co-founder at Goodlawyer.
I mean, you want the detailed version or the quick version?
You can give me the short notes, the highlighted version. Yeah, whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, so I left New Zealand because they were retrenching the office back to Sydney, and I was just tired of moving. And honestly, I didn't like Australia all that much. I liked New Zealand a lot. I didn't love Australia. I was just tired of moving. I'm going to try back in Canada. Came back, was fortunate to get a job opportunity with Paul, building their first commercial farm for Deepwater Farms, which was awesome.
Do you want to tell them what Deepwater Farms is?
Oh, yeah.
It's
so
super cool.
It was aquaponic. I don't know if it's aquaponic anymore. I think it's just hydroponic. But yeah, we had fish and we had baby kale, basically, that were growing in massive quantities indoors. So I was there for a bit, helping them launch that. It was awesome. I was headhunted to another company, which was actually on fire. So I made it 3 months, and then the whole team was gone, myself included. I don't know why I still have that on my LinkedIn. I should just take it off, but...
Hey, sometimes you have to have some dead ends and some markers along the way.
You do, yeah. And then that happened in COVID, right? So it was like March 2020. Was it March 2020?
Yeah, when they shut down the borders.
When I finished my probation and they let me go. So then I was like, I'd seen the writing on the wall. I was out consulting, which is the classic unemployed white-collar professional thing. And my client was Goodlawyer. So I ran into the guys at an event. They were running around giving cards to people, just like willy-nilly. And I was just like, I think we can do a lot better from a marketing and sales perspective. And here's what I would do. And I met them for like a 5 a.m. coffee at the Analog.
5 a.m. coffee.
Yeah, because I still had to work. And then I had my MBA after, because I was doing that as well.
Yeah.
So I was doing my consulting at 5 a.m. 5 to 7 was kind of my consulting time. And that was really hard on my body. But I napkined it out. They brought the napkin back to the rest of their team. They're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's try the grant plan. And then I totally blew their budget. We spent like 10 grand in the first month.
What was their original budget?
Like $1,000 or something.
They liked you so much that they ran with that.
Well, honestly, I was working with like they had another consultant they had, and like that consultant kept like expanding the scope of the project, and I just kind of kept doing it. And then like I didn't care how big the bill was getting.
Yeah.
But they were surprised. So at the end of that, they're like, "We love what you're doing. We have revenue now, but like we can't afford you. Like, do you want to join the team?" And the timing was perfect because the main company I was working at exploded right there, and I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I ended up not having any unemployed time, just jumped right into it. And it was cool also because I had a month to try it. Because after being burned by this other company, I was really cognizant that startups are really risky, and sometimes the product just isn't good enough to compete. That's what was happening.
And that's tough for early stage salespeople. You're kind of, I don't think a lot of early stage founders really consider this because they're obviously the first person to be very invested in their idea. And if they don't believe in it, what the hell are they doing starting a company? But it's very risky for the first salesperson because you have to prove traction. And they're always like, hey, we're going to pay you a little bit. Like, there's different ways of looking at it, but it's like, hey, we're going to give you a small salary and give you huge bonus and maybe a little bit of equity in the business. And so you're starving, trying to show proof of concept for something that's generally brand new. You're taking all the risk. And then they're like, well, there's no traction, so the rest of the company can't eat, and then you're fired. And meanwhile, you're like, you have the personal stresses of I'm not making any money either. And then that plays into your sales. I've talked to a lot of people that were getting started as their first sales hire for startups. And it's a very unique position, and you have to negotiate some pretty good terms so that you feel comfortable. And then the psychological aspect of that is then you can actually sell. But it's like, before you even take a role, do they have proof of concept? Do they have an identified market? Do they have any traction whatsoever in that market? What are the systems they have in place? Like, there's a difference between being the first sales hire and then being the first person to strategically plan out the sales cycle. And like, you probably know this too, but I'm of the opinion that you come on with a decent enough salary that you're comfortable, you get some piece of the upside, and then you get some equity play, and then that it's a sliding scale. So eventually, once you show proof, like you move away from from the salary and go more to a bonus structure, and then depending on your worth, hopefully they come to the conclusion we should give you more equity in what you've built. Hopefully this doesn't get anybody into trouble, but that's my views. I'm curious what you think on that stuff, but.
I think that's exactly it. I think I've seen so many companies hiring their first salespeople, and it's embarrassing how it always goes wrong because it's always the same thing where it's like, oh, this guy can't sell, and then they fire the salesperson. I'm like, bro, you went and hired a salesperson from like a really huge, like selling for Microsoft is the easiest fucking job in the world.
Hi, I'm with Microsoft.
Yes, I will take your call, Microsoft guy. It's like, and they always hire that. They're always like, oh, we'll get the best salesperson. The best salesperson must report to the biggest company. That's kind of the rationale. It's like, no, that's the exact opposite of what you want. You want someone who's worked at a tiny company, who's like worked with products that suck because your first product is going to suck. It's not like you just suddenly started with Microsoft Suite. And you want someone who is scrappy and listening as well, because like, one of the reasons why founders should always be the first salespeople is because they have to hear the feedback. And when you get a Microsoft salesperson in there, like they're just talking. They're just trying to explain how the product works, and they're going to try and get out there. And they're not going to listen to the customer and think about, oh, we can actually build that feature to close this deal. Or like, we should change our messaging because this is the messaging they were given by the founder, but that's actually wrong. They need to be listening and improving it. So I just see a lot of that.
Early stage sales hires is a lot trickier than people understand. And then I was thinking about making a post on this at one point and basically calling it sales is sales, right? Because it's amazing how everybody thinks, well, I have transferable skills because I was in sales. And I heard this all the time. We would hire door-to-door or for the door-to-door companies, and people would be like, oh, I did sales for XYZ. And you're like, okay, but this is a completely different type of sales. So there's obviously B2B, B2C, B2D. What's the other one? Direct? Business to direct, or D2C, sorry. Direct to consumer. There's enterprise. There's small, medium business. There's like all these sort of things. And then early stage versus like legacy systems, and people just don't really consider those things. And then there's like, do you understand the strategy behind the sale, or do you just know how to follow the playbook, right? And there's a lot of those sales reps that just give me the playbook and they'll freaking kill it. But if they have to create the playbook, they're like, it's like watching kids playing t-ball baseball. They're running around in the outfield just fucking picking up daisies. It's like they don't know what to do. Yeah. But anyways, I'd love to hear kind of you share about the founding story about Goodlawyer. So Goodlawyer has gotten a lot of notoriety here in Calgary. You guys have gotten a lot of traction with big companies, big players. There are people that listen from the United States, so they might not be as familiar, but I'd love to hear you share about the founding story of Goodlawyer and what was the initial vision that you kind of signed on for, and where is it now?
Yeah, I mean, the founding story kind of hinted at this, but I wasn't really there for it. Like, I was definitely the last founder. I came in pretty darn late. Idea originally was Brett Colvin and Steve Bodie, who were working at BLG, one of Canada's biggest law firms, and this is a really classic story because I hear this from every company pretty much, but they're just like trying to make change in the company. They have ideas to fix a lot of the friction that they're dealing with in their day-to-day lives, and they also just see the bills going out. And they're like, we're billing out for $500 an hour, and if you reverse the math, we're seeing about 70 of that per hour in our pocket, which granted puts you in like the 1% in Canada. Like, it's a good salary, especially for like basically a new grad. But that $430 an hour that's going to like the firm is kind of grating. And when you look at a guy like Brett Colvin, who's also bringing in his own work because he loves BD and he's out there getting the clients, doing the work, and paying $430 an hour to this firm that's not even listening to his ideas. Like, it's kind of grating. So he gets the idea, we'll build the software to do everything that the firm is doing, and we'll take the rest of that margin, basically. So he finds Parker Smith, employs him as a as a chief technical officer. Yeah. He's a technology officer, he's a CTO. They get building. I think they realize pretty quick that they can't communicate worth a goddamn. So we need an intermediary, that's a product person. They hire Tom Alvarez to be the chief product officer, essentially to mediate and translate what Brett sees as kind of the neat requirements of the software into what can actually be built. And they kind of do this, quite a few pivots and things. Steve Bodie actually leaves, goes back to practice. Okay. And that brings them down to the 3. And then I come in kind of there when they're like, they've got a working prototype and no real go-to-market plan. So I filled the gap on the go-to-market. I wasn't actually labeled a co-founder until maybe 1.5 years into it.
That's such a vote of confidence too, that like you're hugely valued. Like, there's so many times where you'll be an early stage hire and this will never be extended to you. So that obviously speaks well to the kind of work that you're putting in.
It does, and it speaks to me to one of the many things I really love about Goodlawyer and honestly Brett. Like, as much as we're all co-founders, Brett has by far the most equity, and he is the CEO for a reason. Like, it's his thing. He's not afraid to share it. Whereas a lot of startups I've talked to,
mine.
It's too mine, but it's like, it's just pathetic to watch, honestly. I see a lot of startups where it's like they pathetically cling to their like 100% equity stake in a company that will never grow, because you cannot grow a company by yourself.
Do you think that comes from their level of confidence? I know that this is kind of a segue point, but do you think that it's just that they lack confidence in their ability to run their own organization, or that by giving up, relinquishing any control, that they're going to basically prove themselves out of a job?
I don't know.
Okay.
I've seen different things. If I was to take a shot at the most common, I think a lot of founders they start their own companies because they're unemployable.
Okay.
Because they actually don't like working with other people. They think they're the best at doing everything. Yeah. And that other people just suck at everything and like
this hot take
if they get involved. And that's like, it's a reality of high performers. I think high performers generally look down on their colleagues, and like founders are high performers that have the choice of who they work with and their relationships with them. Do they want to work with equals, or they want to just like push down on people, And typically they choose to push down on people. But Brett wasn't like that. Brett's really good at like drawing in people that are smarter than him and even though I know it's frustrating for him sometimes, he's good at working through people.
It's amazing. That is really amazing. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced while building Goodlawyer? And how did your previous experiences at companies like Uber or Deepwater or any of those actually play a part in that?
Building challenges. I think the playbook for building a startup is really like Silicon Valley venture capital based.
Okay.
Like we went through, I think, 5 accelerator programs that basically all told us the same thing.
Okay.
Kind of like, here's how you define your ICP, and here's how you
Can you explain what ICP is? Because
yeah.
a lot of people that are listening to this aren't necessarily in the startup space, so yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I'll keep it tight then as well. But basically, your ideal customer profile. So you start like, here's what your customer looks like. Here's the messaging that'll work. Here's how you approach them. And it basically all comes down to like, send 1 million emails. Like, send lots of emails.
And track it.
And track them. And, it sounds great on paper. And like, I actually think that works for a lot of great software companies, but it is definitely working worse every year for the last 5 years I've been doing it. I imagine like the 10 years before that, it got gradually worse. But the programs haven't kept up with that. So there's a lot of like this Silicon Valley kind of volume mindset to it, which I think is reinforced by a venture capital backed company. Like you can throw a lot more money and do things a lot less efficiently if you've got millions to play with, because you've got a big technical team just kind of burning money. So like your go-to-market team should just be like running as fast as possible in the hamster wheel so that you can get to revenue before all those expensive technical people drag the ship into the grave, basically. For us, that wasn't like that. Like we were kind of sitting somewhere between like a venture company in terms of we have a pretty fast growth rate and we're asset light, and a service company because we get revenue much, much faster than a typical startup. So like we're in between those two. Our playbook is something blended between a service company and a tech company. And we're Canadian. We do not have the same venture capital access in Calgary as we would outside.
Yeah, it's improving, but no, it is not a Silicon Valley by any means.
Yeah, it's not. And maybe that's okay, because I've seen a lot of companies take the Silicon Valley track simultaneous to us. And at first I was like so jealous. I was like, wow, these guys raised $11 million. Like, that's crazy. They're going to be so big. But now I'm seeing those companies collapse, and it looks like the most painful thing ever. Yeah,
they're being pushed through, like you're saying, a playbook that may not be applicable to their market, their area, their lifestyle that they want to build out to, their direction for their business.
I'd argue it's like, people use the term dumb money for angel investors. They're like, oh, this guy doesn't know anything about legal and he's investing in legal. That's dumb money. So far, all the VCs I've seen invest have been pretty stupid with their money.
Yep.
Like they pretend like, oh yeah, we did all this analysis. It's like, there's nothing to analyze. Like you're running numbers on a company with no revenue. Like, what are you fucking analyzing?
Well, at that stage for that particular scenario.
Before you give them $11 million. Like why are you pretending like you know what you're doing?
It is interesting, and I've always considered, if I wasn't in this space right now with the solar company, what it could have been like if I went into the VC route. I've always been fascinated with it, thanks to my experience at Adabotics and sitting at the table for some of the biggest venture capitalists in the world. And that was super cool, but there is a part that isn't acknowledged, and it's luck. Like, you do this analysis of the CEO and officers on the company. You do this analysis of your TAM.
But when you do that analysis, are you doing the same thing that those like we're doing when we hire salespeople? Like, do you look at it and go like, oh yeah, this guy worked at Microsoft.
Well, that's
this guy was a VP at Scotiabank. Like, you do that.
That's what they're doing. They're doing that same thing, and it's so funny because humans are similar, but yet so different. And then to basically witness that people have this commonality bias, like this person's similar to me, and a lot of these VCs had exited their own businesses, and they're like, I'm going to hitch my cart to you, my horse to your cart because you remind me of me. Sure. And you're just like, okay, cool. And then like And then you fucking do it completely different, and then they don't want any association with you anymore. Like, you're less like me than I thought. It's a statement, but
yeah, I could have made this work.
Yeah, but anyways, it's so interesting. That is interesting.
It's wild. And luck is huge. Like the market can change completely. Like, I think like Shopify is a good example where it's like they were doing well, and then COVID happened. Like, every company in the world has to build an online store. Like, of course they go to Shopify, the one kind of leading player.
Yeah.
So like, bajam.
Yeah.
Canada's most valuable company. Like, it works that way, but it also works the other way.
But they also freaking plummeted too, and then they started to build back up because they were valued at like $250 billion at one point, and then they've been on the slog to come back up. I don't know what they're valued at right now.
They're still, I think, number one in Canada.
Oh, yeah, they're the biggest in Canada.
Yeah.
But that was such an interesting play.
Well, you get that, and like Clearco as well, right? It was like, oh, we're going to lend to e-commerce companies based on their like revenue that we see. And then it didn't really work, but like they were hella valuable for a while there. So there's a lot of luck involved, and that's just the truth. What
is your leadership style?
Good question. I try to tailor it to the individual. I think when I was studying my MBA, we studied a lot about leadership. I took a couple of courses on it. And I think the academic response to leadership is that you don't have to be a manager to be a leader. Those things aren't directly connected. I think practically speaking, that's wrong. I think you can be a good team player, but I do not think you can separate those two, because you see it in large companies typically. There's team people who just who crush their work and everyone loves them, and people think, oh, that's leadership. I don't think it necessarily is. I think that's just being a good team player. When you have to make the calls around who's on the team, who stays on the team, when you're dealing with, you have the biggest team of everybody I know because you work with so many different sales reps, but like when people are texting you with like their personal crises, which happens every single week.
Yeah, it feels like it's
if you're
hourly.
A manager.
It feels like it's hourly.
Here's a new test, right? Like, sure, if someone's like mom dies and they go to the funeral, it's a no-brainer. Yeah, take that. But if someone's dog is sick, do you tell them to come to work?
Yeah.
How do you coach that? Is that like, that's when real leadership questions come up to me. Mm-hmm. So anyway, my style, I think what I've realized is that each person is very different on my team, and I've worked with many, many different people during my time, even just at Goodlawyer. They've all been totally different, and I'm trying to adapt my style to each person, and I try to consciously like write down kind of what their strengths and weaknesses are, and their like kind of personality quirks, and why I think they are that way. Mm-hmm. And I work with them to try to like discuss these deep motivations and things. I don't try to do it all on my own.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the way I motivate people and hopefully inspire them is different depending on who they are.
So there isn't necessarily, if I understand this correctly, you don't take the approach of there's one playbook for everybody. And I bet if I was to ask your staff what they think about your approach, it would probably be very much appreciated to be like, hey, I acknowledge that you have unique skills and weaknesses, and therefore we're going to play to those or improve upon your weaknesses. And that's probably more relieving than having a sales team of cookie cutter, everybody's the same. Because you start to find, and we have something that's very, very special to the door-to-door industry. And well, I wouldn't call it special, but it's basically referred to as re-knocking. So we'll go through the same neighborhoods over and over and over again for years. Mm-hmm. We'll knock them 2 to 3 times a year. Frustrating for anybody that gets a door knocked, I understand this. But hear me out on this story though. Depending on the sales rep that knocks on that door, they have a different likelihood of landing that sale based off of their personality, their approach to the customer and those sort of things. And that really builds up our ability to stay in a market versus if I templatize 150 Alistairs, I don't know if we'd necessarily land all the same customers. And
saying no to one Alistair is the same as saying no to all the Alistairs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So now you have the sales team that has different expertise, they have different weaknesses, they have different acknowledgement of their customer base, and I bet that's going to be hugely powerful too. When if you can have them fueling each other too, of like, I don't know if you do, not scrums, but weekly meetings, and maybe when I was in San Francisco, we would talk about our biggest clients with our other sales reps, and we'd get feedback from your colleagues of like, have you tried this approach? And only because that person has that skill set would they know to approach it this way. Do you do anything like that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
we have performance kind of stuff every quarter. We have personal goals. We actually have a psychologist that works with our whole team.
You're like billions.
Yeah, we're that messed up. But the other thing was the team meetings, obviously. Yeah, everyone contributes different things to those, and I really enjoy seeing that magic. And I think, I don't know, it takes a little bit more nuance to deal with a team of individuals than to cookie cutter everybody, but I definitely think it's more practical, because like pretending like everyone's the same is so suboptimal. Like if your job is to manage people, like you're doing the lazy thing.
As a manager though too, I could imagine that just adds a little more zest to your life versus like, here's the guides that I gave to so-and-so for this exact same problem. Like sure, there's a level of templatization that you want to have, but it's, your day-to-day, you know that you're going to address the exact same problems every single day. I don't think you'd have the same zest for going into work by any means.
I think so, yeah. The other piece I'll add on my leadership approach is like, I'm very hands-off. Like I know.
Are you?
And that's kind of like a choice. Like I look at it and I'm like, if I see in my personal evaluation of someone that like they need to be micromanaged, they just get fired because like I can't do that. So like, that kind of solves itself, but that is something I'm pretty firm on, where it's like, I need my team to be able to operate on their own and like to enjoy that, to be, I guess you call it self-motivated, but 99% of people are self-motivated. It's not an uncommon thing. So
it's awesome.
I do try to be not overly controlling.
Okay. So one thing that I've said to you before, you come across as very even keel. And maybe you're very good at emotionally regulating, but you've always appeared very even keel. So I kind of want to get into asking more about kind of like work-life harmonies, stuff like that. So balancing the demands of a startup with your personal life can be very challenging. How do you maintain a healthy work-life balance, and what activities help you recharge?
That's a good question. I mean, you've kind of stumbled on one of my like greatest weaknesses.
Okay.
Which is that I generally won't prioritize my work over my health. Like that's kind of the edge I see, is like when I see the work threatening something in my personal life, I'll typically like draw the line there and be like, you know what, I'm going to bed. Like if I need sleep, it's the most common one that gets in the way, where it's just like, you know, I could get this thing done, but I'm, you know, gonna have to work all night.
Sorry, you're expressing this as a weakness?
I don't think that's in some ways it is.
Okay.
I think
maybe from the
sometimes it's good for the business perspective. Sometimes I think it's good for a business to be able to like, you know, to squeeze someone for like a couple days.
Yeah.
You know, you have to acknowledge that person's going to be like drained afterward. They're going to be suboptimal in their work. But like sometimes there actually are hard deadlines where you need to be squeezed and do it. And I'm really bad at that, and it's something I actively trying to kind of work on. There might be times where I need to just juice myself on something. Yeah. But flip side is like my endurance is really, really good because I don't do that. So like, whereas, you know, you might be able to squeeze like 10 good hours out of someone, you know, 3 days in a row, or like 12 hours or whatever. Yeah. For me, what I bring to the table is like 8 extremely productive hours. Well, I say 8. I commit to 10. Like I do like 10 solid hours, my best hours every day. And if it's like anything beyond 10, then I probably won't do it. Yeah. Because it's going to impact the next day or maybe 2 days. Like it's a very rollover. Bad ROI on that 11th hour for me.
Yeah. I think that's really powerful. I don't think enough employers or even just managers acknowledge the fact that you push somebody really hard, even for just one day, it's going to impact them the next day. And so if you're like trying to continue the cycle, and you see this all the time, people or managers, founders, business owners we want ass in seats. We want you here for 9 to 10 hours. Well, their output starts to drastically decrease. I'm not going to go into this hybrid business models of working from home and all this stuff, but there is like a benefit to somebody being able to compartmentalize their day, go for a 5-10 minute walk, 15 minutes, even the smoke breaks, like you go and change up your day. We won't get into the health side of a smoke break, but they can come back and generally they have like a refresh and they can power out so much more work versus like you're going to sit here for 4 hours and get this work done. I feel like there's a time and a place for that, but come the third hour, like how productive is that freaking person versus like you said, okay, you're going to work for 30 minutes. You're going to have a 5-minute break. Then we're going to do another 30 minutes, 5-minute break and just come back. And what you'll generally find is like they'll hammer out, skip their first 5-minute break, but then they'll take a 10 minutes and then hammer out another hour and come back. And it's just different for each person. But
absolutely, yeah. I think you want to, start with the high level philosophy.
Okay, yeah.
Empower people to like listen to themselves.
Yeah.
And like structure their work the way that makes them productive, I think. There's many elements to it and there's like no shortage of podcasts that'll tell you how to be more productive at work. But for me, the philosophy is like, yeah, like if you're sitting there and you're trying to type shit out and you just keep getting distracted and it's just not working, like try something different.
Yeah.
Similarly, if you're in flow, like don't break the flow. Get her done.
Yep.
And this is also, I'm presuming, I guess, a white collar conversation, but like when I worked as a welder, like it was not the same. Like your productivity doesn't drop off the same. Yeah. So like a 12-hour day for a welder is genuinely 50% more productive than a 8-hour day. So people grind the trades into these crazy hours and it actually produces better results. Yeah. But it sucks for those people. And I think that's where I think I started drawing those lines. Like I worked around a bunch of people who, you know, they're 30 years old and they looked about 50. Yeah. Like they looked terrible. And that was what I didn't want for myself. Yeah. Yeah. Even with Goodlawyer, it was like, it's my baby and like I have so much pride in it. Like I'm going to outlive it. I guarantee you I'll be around longer than Goodlawyer. And like, for that reason, I have to prioritize myself first.
That's good. I like that. That whole leadership management philosophy stuff is so polarizing and so interesting to dive into because there isn't, like you've said, one size for everybody. But there's also this view of if you hire adults, you treat them like adults, they generally act like adults. But generally...
Saying all adults are the same, though.
Yeah. But then you're also getting all these arguments of like, well, this generation, this is how they like to work. And some generations are just like, you need to squeeze them a little tighter, you need to force them a little harder. And I don't think we're ever going to come to like, this is the solution for everybody. But you as a co-founder, you just have to meet that point of like, I'm comfortable with the output that's coming from these people and I'm going to pay them accordingly for what I believe the value that they bring. If you want to put that between some specific time frames of a working day, that's on you. I really respected at Adabotics. They knew some days I could do all my output within like 3 hours or 4 hours. They wouldn't hold me to the desk. They just held me to the task had to be done. But then they knew that there was days that we were there for like 12 to 16 hours. But we still got everything that we had done. Anyways, kind of more of a run-on thought, but I want to segue into some more questions here, get to know a little bit more about your experiences. And so you've been highly active on LinkedIn for a while, like with your posts. I mentioned this at the very beginning, sharing event summaries, lessons learned during your travels, heartfelt acknowledgments, stuff like that. What inspired you to start this, we'll call it consistent posting habit? I've also noticed that some of your co-founders engage in this similarly. I think they do it too. Have you always enjoyed writing, or was this something that was specifically sparked because of Goodlawyer?
I've always enjoyed writing.
Okay.
I love writing. Yeah. It's a life goal for me to write a book. That's always been a thing.
Okay. Grant just lit up for those that listen to the podcast. Just big smile.
Yeah, it's an easy question to answer for me. I will publish a book at some point. The tragic thing for me is that AI makes writing so easy that I'm worried that like the whole book market is going to be totally different and like
flooded.
The like part of me wants to put the work in, right? Like I think when I publish this book, it's going to be a huge challenge and I'm going to have to learn so much and do all these things. And I think, I don't know what's going to happen in the world where you can write a book in a prompt.
I think your book tour will basically highlight Whether or not you did the book via AI or if you actually wrote it yourself.
Yeah, people ask you questions about it, and you're like, I don't even know that character's in there. Yeah. I mean, that actually comes down to what I think will happen is the marketing of the books will be the most important thing, which fortunately is what I do. So maybe there's still opportunity there.
There's opportunity.
Of course, this will not be a business book.
Okay.
I don't know if I've ever told you my philosophy on business books, but...
Well, this is a place to tell it. Share it. What is your philosophy on business books?
Sure. They're not worth the paper they're written on.
Okay. Okay.
There's like, I read tons, to be fair, I read tons of them in university and during the early stages of my career. So maybe I benefited from them and I don't know it, but I think none of them have any kind of scientific rigor. So they prescribe some system on you that's never been tested. And
it's what worked for them.
Yeah, it's what worked for guy that worked at Stripe. And this is the thing that drives me fucking bananas. It's always like these famous companies, right? It's like, okay, this person just happened to be like the COO of Stripe, and now they get to write a book.
Yeah.
And it's hard to see how it's not just like another way to advance their own career, right?
Yeah.
It took 2 seconds to write down like the 3 things that they learned, like their operating principles essentially, and then millions of people buy it and try to be them. And like, well, now none of us are operating Stripe except for that one person. That's like nothing's changed.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it just seems like a bit of a self-serving, like shallow exercise. And you usually expose how weak those ideas are because the books are always the same amount thick. They're always like this. And they could have been like a blog post. Like these 10 ideas do not have anything to back them up.
Yeah. How did you make them into chapters?
Yeah. How did you get to like 200 pages? Like it's insane. Anyway, I'll stop roasting.
No, I do agree to a certain point. It depends on what you are reading the books for. So, for example, Shoe Dog, I read that as a great business biography. Like that was just fantastic. But I didn't sit there. Yeah, so much oil.
Such a fun book to read.
Yeah, so... But I didn't sit there and like, I'm going to take all of this knowledge and apply it to the business that I was in. It was just like, I just wanted to know that. It was the same with the founder of Patagonia. Let my people go surfing. Yeah. Great book. Fantastic.
And his was an employee manual.
Yeah.
Right? Like that was written as a manual. So it's a really interesting story.
That one was interesting. And then was it Ben Horowitz, The Hard Thing About Hard Things? Like these are just more, okay, I'm not alone in these endeavors. Everybody's experienced them, but I didn't use them as playbooks. But there are distinctly like how to make your people 10x their output, like those kind of books. Like I don't find myself reading those very often.
Yeah,
that's AI for me now.
Yeah, why read the whole book when you can just summarize it in 2 minutes? I think the example I always use is Good to Great because people always. They counterpoint me. They're like, this one has this rigorous academic framework to it. I'm like, it's not rigorous at all. It starts at they found 10 companies that were successful. So they found 10 companies that validated their idea. They found 10 companies that didn't. They matched them. And then they're like, this is science. Like, this is not science. Like, if you need to be able to predict. There's no predictive power in any of the frameworks.
So you're talking like Good to Great. That's like
I'm talking Good to Great.
Yeah, that was a serious. That was one of those books I was like,
it looks like it's so intense, right? Like, this is the framework, and we had all these analysts do all this research. And I'm like, you did, but you didn't understand how research works. Like,
or Gallup, or what was it? Gallups
is the surveys.
Yeah, but then they always have books written on kind of the surveys that they do. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, but leadership styles.
Because even that, like surveys aren't like that. Surveys alone aren't that useful because they still don't have predictive power. To really understand something as complex as business, like you have to basically do a randomized controlled trial, which is basically impossible to administer at the right scale. Yeah. The businesses are all too different to like account for all the differences. So you need like a sample of like 10,000. Yeah. It's not 10,000 shoe importers. We're never going to know how Nike like compares to all those, right? Yeah. So anyway, I feel like we were starting on something totally different when we went down this track.
Oh yeah. So I was basically asking about.
Do you like writing?
You liking writing, and then what have you seen from doing all your posts on LinkedIn? You definitely get quite a load of responses from everything that you write, and it's just kind of fun going through the comment section, not to the same degree as like Instagram trolls, but like these are actual people that take your feedback and they're actually engaging in what you're sharing. So just what have you kind of found from being so rigorous with your posting?
I think I've learned a couple things from it. I think one, it's kind of scary to make content.
And why is that?
Having an opinion on something means that you can be wrong, and it means that you can be attacked.
In this day and age, yeah, that's a common,
anything. And it's like, I think it's more natural for me to not, just to kind of like, to listen. I love learning other people's opinions and things. It takes me a very long time to form a stance on anything. When I do form it, I have a stance. Like the stance on books, I'm like, this took me a long time to get there, but now I have a place where I can talk.
But you also have an understanding enough to back up your view on it too.
Yeah, because I've discussed it with a million people.
Yeah,
but like a lot of this like, stuff on LinkedIn is like, it's just so much. Like these are a lot of opinions. I have to make sure that I'm still true to myself, which is like, whenever I post something, it has to be honest. So I have to like really think about things and like try to capture the nuance of my mental state. But it's a one-dimensional communication. Like there isn't the same engagement as a conversation. So I feel like I'm always trying to, I guess, capture my whole thought process into a piece of writing, and I never feel like I succeed. I don't feel like it's a great medium for the topics I'm trying to share.
Okay.
But the second piece that is like, it's really effective. Like this is a huge revenue driver for Goodlawyer, and that is kind of the main reason I'm able to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's also interesting to hear that, well, you're creating content and there's a level of discomfort that comes from it because of potentially other people's feedback or responses. It's so easy to criticize people for creating or saying anything online. I had my first couple of people just ripping my short clips on YouTube. And I had to sit there and laugh. I was like, okay, well, we're in it now.
Yeah.
It's like, what is this garbage? I'm like, bro, I'm trying. Like just fucking relax. But I'm now of the opinion, like, at least I fucking tried. Like, I did something. I put myself out there. I did what I felt was authentic to myself. I'm not going to try and sway other people's opinions. I'm just giving my views. Fortunately, I'm not at a scale now where I have to do like credit checking and validation because I could sway votes or something like that. Like a Joe Rogan, like you have to have some pretty factual backings because of the millions of people that are listening to you. Like if you see Clorox is good to ingest, you better fucking have the backing behind that, But I'm just giving opinions. I'm not giving scientific breakdowns. But anyways, it's just so interesting.
I think so. You asked me for a quote at the beginning, but the quote for this is the man in the arena, the Kennedy quote. But it's
Do you remember it?
It's like a speech more than a quote, but basically the part you have to remember is the man in the arena. It's just about like, no one matters in the crowd. Like what matters is the people doing the thing, and like everyone's got a judgment on the athletes or the fighters. If you're a bit of a fighter, right? So like that's the thing. Just remember that the doers are the ones that matter.
Yeah. Brene Brown talked about that. That was one of the quotes that resonated with her to write one of her books. I am going to read it out because it is such a good one, if you don't mind. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does not actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasm, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that His place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. So that was the beginning of Brene Brown's Daring Greatly book. Like, that stuff's powerful.
It's a great speech, right? That's what people love the Kennedys.
Yeah.
They had a great.
It's Theodore Roosevelt.
It was Roosevelt.
It was
Okay,
Roosevelt.
sorry. Yeah, that was the other option I was thinking. But like, yeah, those spokesmen, right? Those orators, or
Yeah.
help you feel.
I had an interesting discussion with somebody. I was driving them, and she said something that actually keeps her up at night, and this is a complete tangent, is just the loss of language and kind of that whole 1984 of newspeak, and just we're starting to reach this point where AI is just flooding information out there. We're going to lose powerful quotes like this over time due to sound bites and X posts and all these sort of things that people believe are relevant information that you need to ingest. It's sad. And yeah, where's this all going to be in another 100 years? It's just going to be buried.
I'm not sure that pessimistic view. I think that as the
cream rise to the top.
No, I think as the tools for creativity advance, we get just more. Like, I'll use music as the example, but like, recording music used to be super hard. That's why we have like 30 bands that everyone knows from like the 20th century, basically. Like, there were so few bands were producing. Like, whoever was producing got like a huge market share, and everyone could kind of recognize them and all these things. But it wasn't the best music. Like, you look back at like the 70s, 80s, 90s stuff, like, there's some bad songs in there. There's like bad singing, pretty weak instrumentals, poor recording quality. Like, it's just not that good. Now, like, it's way easier to produce music. Like, you and I and everybody has access to professional recording equipment. It's actually better than anything they used in the 50s, for example. And we can do it for like, while doing another job. It's so cheap. And we can distribute it to the entire world instantly through Spotify or something. Like, the result is there's now so much music. There's like stuff that, you know, you never want to listen to because it's garbage. There's also stuff that's way better than was ever produced back in the day.
Yeah.
So I think the same thing is probably going to happen with writing. Like, I think, yeah, a lot of it's going to become really banal because it's running through Gemini or whatever.
Yeah.
Others are going to get way better because they're really investing into every word.
Yeah. Imagine if 50 Shades of Grey had made it through an AI. Because that one was notoriously self-published and grammatically flawed in a lot of places. Yeah, but imagine it went through like an AI lens. But interesting.
I love it.
So getting close to the end here, I have a couple questions that I want to ask kind of in closing. Looking back, would you have ever imagined your career path leading to being a co-founder at Goodlawyer?
Co-founder, absolutely. Goodlawyer, sure, yeah. I always wanted to build companies that mattered. And I knew in my career that I was going to devote kind of the first chunk of it for sure to like high risk endeavors, which building a startup is the most high risk, arguably the hardest job you could do.
Yeah.
So I wanted it to be like that, and this company checks all those boxes. So yeah, this is a good spot for me. I'm kind of leading on the revenue function, which is one of those things where, like, I don't know why I do that, but I chose marketing kind of when I was 17 and just stuck with it kind of thing. Like, it could very well have been a totally different thing, but...
Oh, interesting. So because you said this is the path you're going to... Well, this is the business skill set that you're going to focus on, this isn't really so much a surprise that you ended up where you're at?
100%. But it's weird when you look back and you're like, wow, a lot really hung on that decision that I did not put any time into. Kind of like we were talking about universities, right?
Yeah.
Like, you applied for one university.
Yeah.
I also applied for one university. Like, how many universities are there in the world? Like,
A lot.
Like, millions.
Yeah.
Like, I could have gone to like Abu Dhabi for university if that had been like something I wanted to do. Especially because, like, coming out of high school, like, insane grades, like, without even thinking about prep or anything like that, I probably could have got into whatever university there was in Canada for sure.
Amazing. I was not afforded that with my diligence on my grades was not there.
I proceeded to, fuck the dog in university and end up with like pretty mediocre GPA. When I was looking back at it when I go into my MBA, I was like, actually, I wasn't very good. Especially the first couple of years, I was like,
your priorities
crushing like
changed.
the B minuses and stuff. And then now I realize that like that's basically failing in university context. Like they don't want to fail you. So like if you get a B minus, you should get the like feeling that you're sucking, because that's what the professor's trying to tell you.
Hard love with Grant. That's what's going on here. Okay.
Oh, I mean, can we actually
go for
can
it?
we talk about grading in universities?
Yeah, just might as well. Like, oh yeah.
Okay, this was like the most disheartening thing I got from my MBA, because I wanted to make sure I had a fulsome experience when I was there. So I had two goals aside from just finishing the thing.
Yeah.
One was publish a research paper, so I did publish a paper.
Okay.
The other was to learn what it's like to teach. So I got into being a teacher's assistant for one semester, and like, my first grading opportunity, I had all these undergrad papers to review, and I like went through them and basically failed like half the class. I was like, these are garbage. Well, it had a rubric. I followed the rubric, and like, we're talking about people doing research on a company and not even reading the about page. Like their whole paper was like not what the company does. And I was like, this is pathetic. You're lowering the value of the degree for everyone who graduates if I let you pass. So just tons of comments. Like I really believe the comments and the feedback are the best part about grading. So I just covered it in comments, and then I gave them like the F or whatever. And then like I give all these back to my professor, and she's like, okay, take everybody, bump them all up a letter grade, and no one's failing. I was like,
oh my God, because it's by a bell curve?
It wasn't really not technically a curve until the end.
Okay.
But the philosophy was just like, people don't really fail so much. They're more customers than students at a university. Yeah. Which I hated to hear, because again, I felt like it devalued my work and the work of everyone. And I even felt like I'd been lied to, because like I got all these grades from professors, and I came out thinking, I'm pretty smart. Maybe I wasn't. Like I no longer trust.
Maybe in comparison to your neighbors, you were smarter. Yeah. But they all were so dumb that they bumped you up.
Basically, but like, maybe no one graduates from university being smart, and maybe like the system is just like a pay to play. Yeah, basically, like, can you afford to go to university? Then you get a degree. Is kind of what it looks like.
It's a big understanding to come to after you got your MBA.
I learned a lot from that. And then I had, the funny thing too is like, I got so many emails back from the students being like, whoa, these comments are like pretty savage, but you gave me like an A minus. And all I could respond was just like, read the comments. Like that's the most important part.
Forget your grade.
Yeah, because I see these kids like driving their car off a cliff, and like I'm trying to give them a signal being like, you're not smart. Like when you get to work, like this isn't gonna cut it.
No. The real world is ruthless. You just get fired.
You just don't get the job at all.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna get that chance to be fired. This kind of performance is pathetic. So like part of what I took away from that is like, any chance I can to mentor or improve, or even to get into that system later in my career, I think I'll take it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I like it. Okay, 2 more questions. What continues to inspire you to move forward with Goodlawyer and your personal life?
To move forward with Goodlawyer, I think the market feedback, really, like the cycle, the feedback cycle for a business is growth and making money. And like we get better and better logos, we get more and more revenue. The feedback says you're doing good work. So we're going to keep doing that. With my life, I think, I don't know, it's just awesome.
I love hearing that. Like the fact that that's just your statement, my life's awesome. I don't need to expand on that, because that's the goal for everybody, right? You want to get to a point where...
But I think when I look at it, I think like I'm really, like I'm healthy, which is super important. Physically stronger than I've ever been. I'm recovering from a broken hip, and I still feel like I'm in really good shape. I could probably run the marathon again this year if I wanted.
I forgot that you had a broken hip, and I remember you're like, I gotta go rehab it. We're going to the gym, and you're like, I gotta go do my exercises for my broken hip. When you and I walked into the gym together, then we're gonna do a workout together. Like you did deadlifts heavier than me, and Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, you're doing great there.
You got to appreciate health, right? Like,
Yeah.
most days you wake up feeling great, like, for me at least anyway.
Yeah.
And like, you don't think about it. That's your privilege is that you don't think about it. But when you're like limping around for 6 months, it just reminds you, it's like, wow, this life would really suck if I couldn't walk. Anyway, so health is super important. I think I'm super well supported. Like, I can't believe how many great friends I have like yourself and
Thanks, buddy.
people in like the community that are wishing the best for me. So whenever I do have an issue, I kind of instantly get the support to keep my life going. An example of like how little my life was disrupted by breaking a hip. Like, I took a week off work. That was the only impact.
Physical specimen Grant over here. It's amazing. So I got one last question. Based on your journey, what final piece of advice would you share with our listeners about embracing their unique paths to success?
I guess I'll break down to one, but like, know thyself. That's probably the best starting point that I use for myself, which is like, I think a really good understanding of who you are and like your own personal strengths and weaknesses in an honest, educated way is the part that people often miss when they set goals. Like, they look at like, I want to be here, but they don't really know where they are now. Even in terms of like finances and stuff, like, it's like, how much do you make a year?
Yeah.
What is like the average Canadian make? What are these other roles? Like, what does the progression look like to where you want to go if you want that to be part of your career?
Yeah.
You just need to know benchmarks and things like that if you want to succeed. But it starts with knowing yourself, and I think the weaknesses and things are kind of fun to explore.
You got to be ready for it, though. For a lot of people, it's
ready
uncomfortable.
What makes it easier, I think, for me is like, they're usually a flip of your strengths. So I think people even have a hard time finding their weaknesses, but if you think of them as a flip of your strengths, it's easier. Do you need an example?
Go for it. No, I like that.
Let's say one of the things I find most frustrating with people is when they're like pedantic rule followers. Like, it kind of drives me nuts. And there are some people they're like that, and they love enforcing the rules and they follow them. This shows you my weakness. I'm not good at following rules because I think like there's a spirit to the rule and there's the practicality of it. Like, jaywalking is an example where it's like, the spirit is it's unsafe for drivers and for pedestrians if you just cross the street anywhere because they could be going really fast and it slows the traffic and they could just not be paying attention. Anyway, that's the spirit of it. The practicality is if it's like 2 a.m. and there's no one on the road, you can cross whatever road you want. You just look like it's okay. But the hilarious thing happens when you have two people and like, I run across the road and the other guy's sitting on their side. And now we both just sit there waiting. We both lose. Anyway, so point being, you can flip it. The strength for me is like, I'm pretty flexible in my approach to work and life, and I'm okay like doing things differently to get the result I want. Downside, if I'm in a team where like compliance is critical, or like even just a team where they rely on me behaving consistently, I'm bad at that because I'm not going to behave consistently. So I have to be aware of that and adapt myself to it.
Okay. But that ability to adapt yourself to it comes once back to what you said, knowing thyself. And you know yourself, so you know where you have to make your improvements.
Totally. And there may be situations where I'm like, my flexibility is going to be bad here. Like, I need to consciously like push myself in the other direction while I'm the compliance manager for this company or whatever. Yeah. So as long as you know yourself, nothing's really a weakness. Yeah.
I like that view. I do like that view. Well, we definitely hit our time. I appreciate the conversation. So that brings us to the end of the podcast. I will be sure to share Grant's information for his LinkedIn and where to find him in the show notes. But I really appreciate if you made it to the end of this. You're greatly appreciated. Be sure to share this, like this, help us get this out there, and let's get after it. Peace out.